All right, let's do this. Welcome back to the Post-Production Podcast, everyone. I'm Christy Verbrugge-Post, your host, and if you're new here, this is the show where we dive into the messy, beautiful, mind-blowing reality of building businesses and living life as the incredible women we are here in Abu Dhabi. Now, I don't know about you, but as I'm recording this, summer is knocking hard on our door, and if you're like me, a parent trying to run a business from home, you might be feeling a very particular kind of anticipation mixed with, let's be honest, a little bit of dread. Here's the lowdown. Summer is supposed to be this magical time, right? No more lunch boxes to pack, no more school uniforms to wash. Maybe we can all sleep in a little later. But for those of us working from home with kids, summer also means one very significant change, and that's that our built-in childcare, aka school, just disappeared. Let me paint you a little bit of a picture from my own life. I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old daughter. During the school year, my teenager is my secret weapon. She's basically my built-in babysitter and helper. She holds down the fort on no school days, which allows me to work almost uninterrupted. Huge lifesaver. But come summertime, she heads back to Canada because superheroes need a break too sometimes. Suddenly, it's just me, my energetic 7-year-old, and all of the work responsibilities that don't necessarily take the summer break. My husband works full-time in an office, so the bulk of the childcare falls on me, and my 7-year-old, well, she has really reasonable expectations. She wants me to listen to her latest made-up song with genuine enthusiasm. She wants to show me her artwork. She wants to tell me jokes that honestly make no sense, but she thinks they're hilarious. She wants that connection, attention, and engagement, which, by the way, is exactly what she should want and need. But here I am trying to balance client calls, deliverables, growing my business, and being present for my daughter. Some days I nail it, and other days, let's just say that I don't do such a stellar job. I'm stressed about a meeting while she's trying to tell me about the elaborate story she's created for her stuffed animals, and I can see in her face that I'm just not fully there. If this sounds familiar, I want to let you know that you're not alone. Whether you have one or multiple kids, whether they're toddlers or teenagers, the summer juggle is real. And it's especially challenging for us parents who might not have the extended family support system or the familiar community resources that we grew up with, right? The question becomes, how do we meet our children's very legitimate needs for connection and engagement while also meeting our own needs to keep our businesses running and growing? How do we do this without A, losing our minds, or B, feeling guilty about everything that we're not doing perfectly? So I knew I needed a little bit of help with this one. So I reached out to my amazing friend, Clare O'Byrne. Clare is a pediatric occupational therapist by trade who's recently launched her own coaching business called Globally Thriving. In her practice, she specializes in supporting parents who are raising children internationally. And she's also just launched her own podcast called Globally Thriving Families, where she shares incredible insights about childhood development and practical tips for navigating parenting as an expat. Clare, I'm so honored to have you as the very first guest on the show, and I'm so grateful for you to be here and share your wisdom with other parents who, like me, might be in that same boat. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. It's going to be a good conversation.
So Clare, how about you set the stage, right? Like you're a parent, you're going into the summer, maybe anticipating it with excitement because it's the summertime, your kids are off, and sometimes we just want to hug and spend time with our kiddos. But at the same time, you have a business that you're maybe just getting off the ground or it's up and running, but you don't want to lose momentum and you want to keep going at it, right? How as parents can we bring both those worlds together?
Such a good question, Christy. And I think it's a really, really valuable thing to be discussing. Because when we talk about productivity, when we talk about business and entrepreneurship, there's a lot of emphasis on the doing and the success and the getting things done. But when you are parenting, adding parenting, there are so many other dynamics to it. So having this open conversation hopefully is going to help people feel seen in some of those things that they are trying to figure out in the back of their mind. They might not even be trying to figure it out loud necessarily, because they're focused on, oh, I really should be getting this done and I really should be getting that done. So this is why I'm excited to talk about it. Now, when I think about how to optimize your summer in terms of your work and also family life, I think about it in sort of 4 basic pillars maybe, or 4 topic areas that are pertinent. So just to give everybody that insight about what we're going to talk about, firstly, I'm going to talk about flexibility and open-mindedness, which is really the first place that you're going to start with this as a parent and entrepreneur. And then secondly, it's really getting down to the practical side of it in terms of how does everybody manage their self-regulation and their activity, their need for movement, their need for fun and adventure and regulation, because that's, the nitty-gritty of what do I do with my kids. And then the third thing is about really, I guess, giving some airtime to that whole concept of connection. You mentioned it. You're really talking about the different kind of priorities that mums usually, but dads too get it if they're the ones at home, the priorities that they're competing, aren't they really?
Absolutely.
And then the fourth thing is, we have to ultimately come to some reframing and how we view productivity as a whole.
Okay, I'm really, really excited for this conversation, Claire. But first, I want to know, are you ready? Are you ready for this conversation? Because if you're ready, grab yourself a cup of coffee or your favorite cup of something and let's dig in.
All right, awesome. So yeah, the first thing, like I mentioned, is we have to approach summer as a whole with flexibility and open-mindedness. And again, you made reference to the fact that on one hand, everybody is frazzled at the end of term, and summer, we welcome summer in terms of a change in the routines, or, the pressure's off a little bit, with uniforms, with lunchboxes, with maybe the alarm clock, those kind of things. So, you're anticipating a bit of a break to some extent, or a change. I won't say break because we know it's not really a break for us. But on the other hand, if you are, starting as an entrepreneur or you're a seasoned entrepreneur, you have become accustomed to utilizing the time when your children are engaged in school or in childcare outside of the home or paid childcare in any other capacity. We rely on that. We rely on those pockets of time to do what we need to do, because we know that even in the evenings, for instance, there are other things going on. There's always going to be competing priorities. And actually, when they are engaged in school or nursery or childcare, that's usually the only protected time. Even just being aware of that, of course we're aware of it, but just spending a few seconds acknowledging that to yourself. Your kids are going to be like, yay, school's out. And you'll be like, yay. But you might not actually be feeling a wholehearted yay. What I really recommend is reflect quietly. And, maybe you do it on a piece of paper and a pen or a journal, or maybe you do it on your laptop, or maybe you just do it in your head. But you have to spend a few minutes thinking, what do I want this summer to look like? What things do I need to do? What things do I want to do? And what matters most to me overall? And this isn't a question about, anybody making a judgment about what matters most to you, but you have to get real with yourself. Most of us tend to say, we might want to have a little adventure or have some fun and relax. And I've also got all these goals, things that I need to do. If you are in business, then you might have specific deliverables. You might have some things that you are accountable for. It might not just be a summer of brainstorming and content creation or all those kind of things. It obviously depends on what you do. So really spending some time at the beginning thinking about what are the needs and what are the wants and what are the family experiences that I want to have. because different amounts of children in the family is really going to dictate that level of hands-on care and engagement that they will require. They're all going to need some engagement. You can't ignore older kids or teens because that can be a disaster too. So everybody needs some engagement, but it's a different level of hands-on care. So for you to have that awareness, you can then figure out, how do I work around this? And how do I make it work for me and for them?
And I really like how you talk about flexibility, because for me too, as I listen to you talk and I think about my own times where I've gone into the summer and anticipated all of these wonderful things that I was going to do for both my business and my family, and came out of the summer with my shoulders hunched down a little bit because it didn't go according to plan. I think also going in with an idea that, the best laid plans aren't always meant to unfold the way that we want them to unfold. So I like your idea of going in with a little bit of flexibility, because things don't always go according to plan. We think of summer as being this really nice long runway of time. And in reality, it's 8 weeks at most? And it takes a little bit of time to ramp up and to get into a summer routine. And then after that, before you know it, it takes 2 weeks and you're scrambling to kind of get everybody's uniforms purchased for the next year and school bags and all of the school supplies. And so before you know it, you're kind of getting back into school time mode. So you really only have those 4 core weeks of summer where you're vacationing or taking care of your business, or where your mind isn't otherwise occupied in getting your family set up. So I really love your idea of coming in with intention and flexibility and mindfulness that, the summer will be different according to what your priorities are.
And I'll say this now, and I'll say it again probably throughout the conversation, is you have to go into it. I mean, of course, I think it's good for us to have high standards for ourselves. We should always, have those high standards, but that it shouldn't equal the pressure, because what am I going to think or feel if I don't meet those standards that I've set? So along with sort of thinking the best for ourselves in terms of what we can achieve, we also have to think of it with a boatload of grace and self-compassion. And if we don't have that, what happens is the other experiences we have, the connection we have with our family, the extended family that we see, the friends we visit with, they start to get tinged with maybe some guilt, maybe some resentment, and we want to be able to maximize joy, right? I mean, every single day is not necessarily going to be joy filled, okay? But every single day needs to end with some grace and self-compassion, that we did our best, that we adjusted. And if we can do that as much as possible with flexibility and open-mindedness, that sets you up for a better summer where everybody gets their needs met as much as possible.
Absolutely. So going into the summer with a little bit of grace, a little bit of self-compassion, a little bit of flexibility for ourselves and our kiddos, a little bit of that nice leeway, right? That nice space for us to exist imperfectly, I guess.
Showing up in a messy way, but we're just, you're moving the needle forward in whatever way it is. But it's not at the expense of everything else around you, because, even if you are an entrepreneur who is like super excited about what you're doing and, that really fills your cup or your bucket or whatever, even if you feel that way, that is not the only facet of you. That is not the only thing that creates your identity, right? So there are other things that we also want to do and engage in and get some pleasure out of.
Right. So how do we do that? How do we engage? How do we engage with ourselves, our work, our kids, most importantly? How do we get our summer started off right?
Yeah. So, it's great that we can talk about some of the intangible stuff, but when it gets down to it, it's like, well, what the heck do I do with my little ones, or with my school-age child, or with my tween? Let me just give you an idea of some things that you can think about to maybe get your own creative mind going. The different ages of your child will really dictate how hands-on you need to be, what kind of things excite your kids and engage them, what their sort of needs are in terms of activity and stimulation. So you need to really tune into your kid, basically. The overarching kind of principles are all of our kids, no matter what age, they need a variety. They need movement. They need cognitive stimulation. They need some variety. They need some novelty. They need nourishment. My kids are 11 and 13, so their needs are a little bit different. But, if you do have younger kids, you're really wanting to look at activities that you have to be realistic too. Okay. It's going to be very hard for you to, which you probably know this already, but just to sort of reiterate, it's going to be hard to just say, okay, Mum's going to, my bedroom where my desk is, and I'll see you in about 2 hours, and please do these puzzles. That is not going to sort of end that well for everybody.
For our listeners' sake here, I have been guilty of doing that with my 6/7-year-old, right? I have been totally guilty of saying, sorry, Bunny Rabbit, Mommy has this meeting to go into, or Mommy has to really concentrate. See you later in 2 hours. Here's an iPad, please only knock on the door if there is an emergency, right?
Well, you know what? Of course. And don't have the guilt for that, because of course that's what most of us do. And I've done it too. I know this information, and I have still done it, because in the moment we're doing what we think will work for us. But also remember that developmentally, our kids don't have those same reasoning skills that we have. So they're not able to even sort of think to themselves, oh, you know what, Mum's got a really important meeting. I better not jump and crash around, or I better not get into an argument with my brother or sister. It's very their brains aren't fully developed enough to have that. So I totally get it. And, I'm sure if everybody thinks back to COVID, we were all doing that. And that's what led to a lot of conflict and stress and dysregulation amongst all of us. So, I understand that you feel guilty, but we've all done it too. So this is why, giving you some of this info now and sort of front end loading the summer with a few pre-planned things. It's not a magic wand, but I'd love to get feedback actually from your listeners at the end of the summer and see, did any of these things work? So, just to sort of quickly list off a few things. If you've got toddlers, if you've got preschoolers, and even school age kids, they all love novelty. Okay. So even things that we think are, for younger kids or a bit more babyish, can actually be really engaging. And if your school age kid hasn't touched those things to play with for a while, there is an element of novelty there. So you might find that if the things that you kept from years ago, reintroduce them, because everyone is craving a bit of novelty, right? What I love, sort of utilizing kind of my OT background, is things that are also hitting some developmental benefits too. And almost everything that is play-based has got developmental benefits. And that's the thing. You think they're just jumping off the couch, and I know that can be, it may not be allowed in some people's households. It might not be safe, so obviously look at what you've got and your furniture and all that sort of stuff. But actually jumping off the couch or playing the floor is lava and doing obstacle courses that you can set up with yoga boards or yoga mats or chairs or cushions, those kind of things. You don't have to pay money to buy new stuff. You literally will whip around the apartment, if it's an apartment, or one room in the house, where you can just grab whatever you can. Obviously, look at safety, and they can be occupied with it. And it's not just about being occupied. It's getting in some movement needs. It's getting in some sensory regulation needs, which is a much longer conversation. So I'm just going to talk broadly more about sensory regulation rather than get too specific. But so anything you do with them is actually going to have a benefit. Something I love, and I think almost any age, school age for sure. Even now, if I gave this to my kids, they'll do something with it. It will keep them occupied. I love window markers. You can get them off Amazon. If you are living in Abu Dhabi and you live in an apartment, you probably have some massive windows somewhere in the apartment. Let your kids go crazy. It's fully washable. If you get the proper window ones, they're fully washable. And it's a little bit of a novelty. Like, what? I can draw all over the window? Are you sure? Yeah, go crazy. That will give you, it's not going to be 2 hours. It's very rare to get like a massive, massive chunk. And that is why at the beginning, really discerning what tasks do I want to engage in? What tasks do I need to engage in? So you can match the way you're occupying your kids and the way they're occupying themselves and what you need to do. You have to do some task matching. But I love vertical surface work, which is windows, getting a massive roll of paper from IKEA, stick it up with blue tack or tape or whatever doesn't damage the wall. The blue tack is usually good. Get it on the door, get it on the floor, if you can get it on a vertical surface, you are hitting so many developmental benefits at the same time. Shoulder girdle strengthening, wrist positioning for handwriting. If anyone's listening and they have preschoolers and school age kids, or even if they're older, all of those things are still going to help them developmentally. But particularly with preschool and school age, you're doing therapy with them almost, like you're getting their bodies ready for the skills that they need, fine motor skills and writing and sitting upright at the desk and their core strength. Like everything that your kids are playing with at home has got a developmental benefit. So it's just maximizing it. Now, the one thing I was going to say is if you are in the Middle East, as we know, it's so hot in the summer. So yeah, normally, my therapist sort of approach is to really big up being outside, outdoor play, getting to the play place, walking through a forest. But again, let's have a real moment here. If we're in the Middle East and people are sticking around for the summer, it's way too hot. It's a safety issue for our kids to be outside. So this is why it's actually really important to consider how can we meet our child's need for activity and sensory regulation and stimulation, which is essential for them to also then do more calming activities or maybe more cognitive activities like the puzzles or the card games. Because our bodies, our kids' bodies, and we'll come on to that in a minute, but our bodies too, need to be prepared. So again, you're not going to wake up and say, Mummy just needs 2 hours. Here's your cereal, and Mummy needs 2 hours. And again, this is not a judgment. This is not about value judgment about you doing that. It is purely about what is going to be the most effective because the kids' needs need to be met. So if you can do physical things in the home, it's not like swinging from a chandelier necessarily. I mean, if you have that kind of equipment, great. It is getting creative with obstacle courses. It is getting creative with maybe doing yoga, things that give them some resistance to their body.
Can I ask you a question? Because you've just talked about yoga and meeting our body needs, because I have needs too, right? And in the morning when I wake up, sometimes I may not be feeling the best and I'm a little bit sore from a crummy night's sleep, or my mind isn't in the right kind of space to jump into the day fully happy and ready. And sometimes I just need that, that 15 minutes of mindfulness or that like gentle stretching in the morning. Is that something that I can, if my child is awake and I turn on a YouTube video with gentle yoga on the mat, is that something that I can engage with my child on? And is that something that would meet their needs as well as my own? And then we can both start our days off right in a connected way, but then we can transition into breakfast together and then I can set them up for something while I do a little bit of a work burst.
100%, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. And that sort of segues really nicely into the connection aspect. Now, even though I'm sort of talking about these as separate kind of topics, every single one of them is completely interconnected. There is a thread going through them because all of them lead to each other. If you're not flexible, it's hard to sort of reframe then, right? Or it's hard to plan. if we're not looking at the activities and the physical needs and the sensory needs that you both have, then it's very hard to connect. So you're absolutely right. We as individuals really need to be, it's not just about our kids. It's never just about our kids. We have to take care of our own regulation needs. What I mean by that is, what are our needs for movement? What are the things that sort of are a sign that we're understimulated? Are we tuning into our internal body signals for water, for food, for when we need to go pee? And you know what it's like when you're really engaged in a task. Sometimes that's very hard to recognize your own needs. So this isn't just about, making sure our kid is okay and get what they need. You have to do it too, because actually you're on double duty. You're keeping a human alive and safe for this period of time, but you also want to accomplish something for yourself, right? So if you can start the day, now again, everybody's schedule is completely different. If you've got young kids, maybe they're getting up super early at the crack of dawn, and the thought of getting up half an hour before them is like, no way. So if you're that person, then what you need to think about is, how can I start the day with some regulation? And it's not always about being calm, by the way. Yes, it's nice to start the day in a calm way, but that's not always possible. And actually, really, when we talk about being regulated, it's about, does the energy that I am bringing and I have match the situation, or match like the activity that is needed? So in the morning, if you do have young kids and they come crashing in, racing in, maybe taking that time to have a snuggle, have a cuddle, start a little bit slow, rather than just thinking about all the things that need to happen in that day. And I'm not saying you need to do that for an hour. Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 2 minutes. If you can have a cuddle and a snuggle or a tight hug or that kind of thing, that is meeting some kind of tactile stimulation that can actually be really calming and regulating.
I'd really like for you to walk me through how that meets some sensory needs, because you and I were having a discussion off the podcast the other day about something called proprioception. And I wonder if that's something that you can walk the people who are listening through, because I was fascinated by how that works and how it's essential to not only us, but our children too, and how it helps their development. So yeah, I was wonder if you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, totally. So sort of really briefly, we have, most people think of having 5 senses: touch, taste, hearing, smell, and vision. Right. So but we actually have 8 senses, and there's 3 of them that influence how we move through the world, how we react to things, how we respond. And a bit more, people are usually more tuned in to understanding that in their kids, but our sensory system is working in the background, whether we pay attention to it or not. We all have a unique sensory profile. So where proprioception is concerned, there's another name for it, and it's heavy work. So that is awareness of our body position in space. So when you're standing on the floor, you are aware, because of the resistance that's coming. You can feel it through the joints, you can feel it through your muscles and your feet and your legs. I know I'm standing on the floor. So similarly, things like a really squeezy hug or a deep pressure massage, that is giving your body, your sensory system, feedback about where your body is in space. And it's through those muscles and joints. For heavy work / proprioception, it's the same thing. So yoga is amazing for it, and Pilates, and for women too, and men, like lifting weights can be, but it doesn't have to always be that, and it doesn't have to be like a class, an hour-long class. It can be, when you don't necessarily need an hour. Maybe you just need 15 minutes to really check in with your body and your brain. How am I feeling? What kind of things are coming up for me in terms of, the expectations of the day, or things that we're stories that we're telling ourselves. And if you can start the day with something that is sort of got some heavy work involved, that's a really good kind of segue into what you then have to face. So maybe it's while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, you are doing a few push-ups against the counter or pressing your hands together. The kids, sorry, just to go back to the kids and their proprioception. So all those things about the stuff with the building, we didn't mention building a fort, but doing an obstacle course, building a fort, all those things are going to involve heavy work too. So when I say think about those physical and sensory needs before you expect them to do something quietly or calmly, is you're actually getting their body and their nervous system prepared to be able to do those calm things. But it works exactly the same for you. If you know you've got to go and sit in your room at your desk and work on something like a document or, you know, a resource, or if you've got to go into a client call and you need to feel grounded, heavy work is what helps with feeling grounded. I won't say it's magic, but it can be magic. It can, because it's never dangerous. And it brings you where you need to be. So even if you're actually feeling sluggish and low energy, you're not overstimulated, you might be understimulated or bored or seeking some novelty or needing something. Proprioception often is the thing that actually can help you.
Now, let's say, you know, you might not have the time to stretch, or you don't have the space to stretch yourself out or do that yoga, or might not have the time to do the counter push-ups. If you have a weighted blanket and you wrap yourself in your weighted blanket, does that have the same effect?
That's a really, really good question. So, I mean, yes, a weighted blanket is giving you proprioceptive heavy work input because it's giving loads of feedback through your lap or, you know, wherever you've got it, if you've got it around your shoulders. The key is tuning in to your body. And most of us don't tune in enough to actually discern what might be needed or to then think of trying something different. So a weighted blanket could be great, but it also might not be what you need at the time. Maybe you need something more movement based. So maybe you need to just do a couple of downward dog poses or something and then have the weighted blanket. You know, it's like they're like little regulation snacks or something that you have to kind of trial and error. And it's the same for our kids, to be honest, too.
Talking about snacks.
That's a good segue. So you can get heavy work through the snack that you have too. So through our jaw movements, we can get this proprioceptive input too. So when you're eating something that is very chewy and crunchy or chewing gum, that is heavy work for our jaw. And actually that can be very sort of regulating for our kids. It's also for yourself too. So if you're preparing snacks and getting stuff ready for your kids, just you try them too, have them too, because that also can give you those little breaks, those proprioceptive snacks, movement snacks or regulation snacks that you need to help you get through your next 25 minutes of work. I know you've been talking about Pomodoro technique, right? So that's about 25 minutes. Yeah. So maybe you need that in order to support you in getting through that 25 minutes rather than it being, you know, a big uphill struggle like, oh my God, is it 25 minutes yet? Maybe a weighted blanket and a snack might help you. But when we're thinking about stuff for our kids, often it's stuff that, you know, everyone's got unique needs, but the universal thing is that we all have needs. So we all need to figure out what works for us.
I wanted to do a little bit of a shameless plug for Claire's podcast in that first episode where you talk about those sensory needs of your kids and when they feel overstimulated, how you can help them to sort of ground them. And one of the things that you were talking about was having those crunchy snacks, but also a smoothie, right?
Yes, it's the same thing. When you're sucking something through, and there's resistance. So you know, obviously with water, there's absolutely no resistance, right? But with a really thick smoothie, there is more resistance. And so it sounds funny, but those jaw movements and, you know, there's a lot of sort of receptors in the mouth area that actually is providing heavy work too. I always make one for my kids after school as just part of like a routine to sort of help them with that transition from the school day.
Do you need a straw? Like, obviously it's better to have a straw, but if you don't have a straw available, is having a smoothie the same if you don't have a straw?
No, it's the sucking. That is the
Right.
actual, that's the action. And the smoothie is just the vehicle for that to happen. It's the right
Got it. Consistency.
what's consistency. Yeah.
Okay. So, Claire, we've talked about some food. We've talked about some movements that we can do. We've talked about keeping our kids occupied with things like those window markers. Is there anything else that you can think of that can help parents be a little bit more supportive of themselves and their kids at home during the summer?
Yeah. So I'm glad you sort of asked me that, because actually one thing I forgot to mention was, when you're thinking about the practical stuff, like what do I do? How do I do it? When do I do it? Another tool that you can use to support that whole thing is visual schedules. And so I love visual schedules because it helps to sort of take away that mystery of who's doing what and why am I doing it, basically. And particularly with kids who sometimes they need to see what is coming next. They need to know what's in front of them for them to feel safe in what they're doing. Okay, that not knowing is kind of hard, although they won't necessarily verbalize that necessarily or have that reasoning to identify it. But not knowing what comes next can be tricky sometimes. It can be a challenge. So this is why I really like visual schedules. And it also helps us too to keep us on track. Now, when I say on track, I don't mean everything has to be adhered to. And if it doesn't, then it's a failure. But it's more of a guide. It's a support, because it helps us to, do you know what it does? It actually helps us with our executive functioning, because we're not always having to remember and retrieve every little thing about what comes next in the day. So it's good for them and it's good for us. And the thing about visual schedules is, I mean, you can get lovely fancy ones, right? And if that's something that you enjoy, maybe you want to make it, maybe you want to get one off Pinterest or something, that's lovely, but it doesn't have to be that. You can get a whiteboard, you can write it.
Can you use those window markers that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, brilliant. Do it on the window. I love that. And then, if your kid is younger, maybe they can sort of color in the square when it's checked off, getting them involved and giving them that job to do. Or if they're, learning to write and they're practicing, they can practice their writing. And it doesn't have to be the writing. That is the thing. It doesn't have to be a word thing. It can be a picture. It can be a drawing. It could be anything, because you're the boss. You guys are making up the rules. Nothing has to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be correct. What does my kid recognize in this schedule? It could be photographs. You could take pictures of them doing an activity or pictures of the activity so that they know as well.
So I want to take a step back here and kind of put parents or people who are listening to this in the right frame of mind here. When we talk about visual schedules, what exactly, obviously is serving us as a reminder for what needs to happen during the day, but it's also needs to serve our kids, right? And so what are we putting down in these visual schedules? Are we putting down activity times, snack times, and do we also put in there, okay, mommy needs an hour to have a meeting? Or, so walk us through what a visual schedule could look like practically.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the sort of general answer to this is that it is going to totally depend on how old your kids are, what their abilities are, what their needs are, and how you set things up in your home. But for instance, it could start with having a beautiful breakfast together. So maybe it's not just the to-do things, but it's also like, here's the lovely fun stuff we're going to do as well, right? So maybe it's breakfast, maybe it's a drawing of the yummy breakfast they're going to have or something like that. You can have a time amount if you want. It might not be meaningful to anybody except yourself, right? So, they're not going to know, oh, okay, we've got 20 minutes for this, all right? School age kids, they don't have that future planning skill, right, as a cognitive skill. So that's not going to mean as much to them. But they might look forward to the fact that they're going to have a nice breakfast together. Then they might be maybe you've got some slime activity, or, Maybe you've got something with Play-Doh or something, maybe it's some fun sort of sensory craft or something, then maybe you've got a picture of that or a drawing of that or the object, a picture of the object. So then you might have that. Then you might have the snack put in, right? Maybe there's a picture of mummy having a lie down, if that's what it is, right? So it's about awareness, not necessarily saying, look, kid, this is how it's going to go. It can be a bit of everything. It can be a bit of that. It can be a bit of sort of the forward planning, but it's also a connection tool, a communication tool, and it's helping them cognitively, to be honest. So I'm always in the back of my mind thinking of the ways that we can look at the benefits for kids. All these things are doing so much for them. Maybe you section in a time where you're going to bake something with them. If that's your jam, do it, because that's got developmental benefits too. It's got heavy work, proprioception, it's got a lot of cognitive stuff, and you've got a snack after it. So it's according to what you
say, there's a yummy result.
Yeah. So you would like, I know that you love food and cooking and all that sort of stuff. You would love that.
Oh,
I do those things, but it's not necessarily like what gives me joy. It gives me a little bit of stress sometimes, but so everybody's a bit different about how they want to put those things in the day. But just know this, anything that you do with your kids, anything that they sort of do at home, other than the fact that if it's really dangerous, is got a developmental benefit. So if they have some moments of boredom, then that is actually really good for their cognitive function, their executive function, and it's needed. So this is not about how can I make sure every waking moment is filled with something. It's a loose guideline with some materials that you have thought about and set up that give them some options. You are not a camp counselor, right? You are not in charge of all of their entertainment.
I really am happy to hear you say that. And I also want to just kind of go back a couple of moments ago to where you were talking about making sure that some of these activities that you do with them fills your own cup too. And I like the concept. We talk about this sometimes. I hear it in and out talking with other parents, other business owners who are parents. The idea of putting your own oxygen mask on before meeting the needs of your kids, right? And so you need to make sure that while you're being a parent and doing the things to address your kids' needs, you also need to make sure that it's not stressful for you. You said that baking can be maybe a little bit stressful for you, but for me, I mean, that's like, it fills my cup completely. So that would be an example of me putting my own oxygen mask on so that I can hear another episode of Paw Patrol, right?
100%. Absolutely. Because the thing is, we have to remember is we exist also independent of our kids, and we are valuable and we're very worthy of looking after ourselves and meeting our needs too. And I know it's easy to say that. It's very hard to do because we have so many competing preconceived ideas. In the moment, we believe that, as long as my kids are happy, I'm okay. And, there are times when our kids' needs will absolutely come before ours, and it's not always about me. But the thing is, it has to sometimes be about me, right? So if you are engaging in things throughout the day, forget your work, forget your entrepreneurship thing at the moment, even at that aside, if we're not tailoring in moments of ourselves for play, I'm a real proponent of adults playing and doing something just for the sake of it that they enjoy and they love. You don't have to be good at it. You don't have to be competitive. You need to have the skills. If you love a song on the radio right now, and you need a movement break, you need to regulate yourself. Maybe it's dancing around while that song is on and getting them involved. You've got to really weave in those moments and, bring them into your world a little bit too, because that's a nice connection thing as well, isn't it? About including them and they see the joy, they see the smile on your face, they see your sort of eye, you brighten your energy that you're giving to them, because the connection part is what it all boils down to, right? You have to sort of think about those micro moments of little pockets of joy. I keep coming back to joy. You might not always feel joyful, but just feeling restored in some way, or seen or heard. Maybe it's a conversation with a friend or a Zoom call, whatever. I was going to say another thing, which I didn't mention earlier, but if you can, it's a practical thing, but it's also a connection thing. If you can, no matter what time your kids get up, if you can start their day with some connection, then that is going to sort of be a good anchor point for, if you can give them the connection that they need. All our kids want to connect, right? If you can give them that at the beginning, that will help you for the times later on in the day when you need to then separate. Now, another thing is, we haven't mentioned it yet, or maybe we did mention it, is the screen issue. So,
right, because that is a hot topic, and I know it features in a lot of mom guilt, right, including my own, and the idea that I think we've sort of come to a space, I know that I have, so I'll speak for myself, where I've forgotten what it's like to be a kid. I've forgotten what it's like to be creative and come up with creative ideas. And my mom is kind of brilliant at it. And I'm just going to allow myself to digress for 2 seconds. While I was there a couple of months ago, she came up with a brilliant plan. We needed about half an hour to do a task together, but the kids wanted to engage with us. And so my mom came up with the brilliant idea, okay, count how many doorknobs there are in the house. And so they would go off on this scavenger hunt, of counting how many doorknobs there were in her house. And I completely forget about those things, those simple things that you can do for your kids that don't involve screen time, that also engage in their, cognitive abilities and development. And so, yes, please.
So first, you mentioned, so the two things there. One, there was a bit of creativity with what she was suggesting. And for them, there's novelty. So, I've never been asked to do that before. I'm going to do it. And it's a bit of a challenge. So when you give them a bit of some kind of physical activity and there's a purpose to it, that usually works better for them. They will get more regulated from that. When you see kids just running around, often we think it gets their energy out. And yes, it does to an extent. But when it's not really directed to anything, it can actually kind of rile them up a little bit more and get them a little bit dysregulated. So I love, and especially if you're here in the summer and you're in an apartment a lot of the time, that movement is going to need to be directed. So I love the sort of task specific thing, getting them to even physically carry stuff from one place to another. We don't want our kids to be on the screens the whole time, because what is happening in that situation is they're not meeting their other needs. It's usually at the expense of the other things that the other experiences and their other ways of meeting their needs in their body, for sensory stimulation, for activity, cognitive stuff. So I am not in that camp of keep them away from the screens entirely, because I recognize that there's no point really saying that, because usually when somebody does completely say that, it comes with some pretty heavy feelings on our part, whether it's guilt, that sort of shame even too, actually, so, we've all been there, me included. So when it comes to what do you do in the summer, right? And we're talking about entrepreneurs here, right? We're not, it's, there's parenting and there's also, hey, I've got a job to do. What I would say is use screens if you need to. Of course, screens are a tool. Screens are not the enemy, right? They definitely can, overtake, and they're very, kids just love them, but yeah, they love them. We also love our screens too, right? We love our phones. So this, I know this isn't a debate about that or, a full conversation about that, but the only thing I'm going to say is, if you need to get something done, if you absolutely 100% or 99% need a block of time where you have to focus, where something needs to get done, where there needs to be a quiet element in the house, then screens are a tool for that. and use it without feeling bad about yourself, because there is no point feeling bad. You can recognize like, oh, I'm having some feelings about it, but you're making choices every day, and you're doing it with, you're doing it with sincerity, you're doing it with love, you're doing it with care, and you're doing it with some obligation and responsibility at the same time, right? So use the screen. If you need it, do it and move on. Get your thing done and feel pleased with yourself that you got your thing done. Because you're also going to be sprinkling in all these other things that are going to be very regulating for your kid and very enriching for your kid. So feel good about the fact that you have, try to get some balance between things that are developmentally enriching and things that are a tool that we use when we need it.
Thank you for that. I know that I myself needed that reassurance because I do use screens as a tool. They are a tool. They're sometimes a very necessary tool. I also loathe to use them, right? Because I feel all of that guilt, and there's so much stigma around the use of screens. And this is such a hot and controversial topic. My philosophy is all about normalizing the fact that we're all human. And we're not super humans. We try our very best to be, but we can't be everything and be like the super creative individuals that come up with scavenger hunt / floor is lava courses all over the house so that our kids can play while we do work, right? That's not realistic, and it's not productive. For me anyway, it's not productive, right? So thank you so much for normalizing that, helping normalize that.
Yeah, I was just going to say with screens, I also don't want to kind of give people the idea that it's sort of a last resort necessarily, because it might not be anything to do with your business. It might be that, you know what, I did baking. I got the obstacle course set up. I got all these fun things. We've connected. I actually want to go read a magazine. So you can do that too, because this segues into reframing our productivity. It is not all about how much can we get done. Now, there will be times when in that moment it's how much can we get done. But our life is not just about how much we can get done. If we can't take care of ourselves and tune into our own needs to even recognize how to take care of ourselves, then it's hard for us to be productive. You're always on the back foot. And that's what often leads to overwhelm and burnout and all that sort of stuff. The thing about being the business owner, and if you're just starting and you've got all the ideas, or even if you're very well established and you have a lot of things that need to be fulfilled in that time, that's why reframing the productivity. Summer is a different time period to the term time. We've already said that. So you can't do things exactly the way that you maybe usually do them or you want to do them. So if we really think about what is being productive is not just about having an end product. Productivity is taking care of ourselves as well. Like resting is actually productive, because we need to give what our body and our brain needs in order to get up, move, think, create, engage, connect, plan, prioritize, right? All of that stuff just can only really happen as much as we are aware of our needs and meeting our needs. So when we're thinking about reframing productivity as well, and I said this at the beginning, but it really, you need the reminder, because it comes at every sort of stage of this process, is we have to have the self-compassion. We've got to cultivate a little bit of that. And when you sort of, as the summer draws to a close and you're buying the uniform and you're getting all those things ready again, you may not have done exactly what you thought you were going to do. And
Right.
You're going to have some feelings about that. You might feel disappointed. You might feel a bit annoyed.
Despite going into the summer with that in mind, right? What we talked about at the beginning, that things won't always go according to plan. Like, go into the summer knowing that at the end of the summer, you're going to feel a pang of disappointment, probably no matter what, right? Like, you won't have done all of those amazing things that you set out to do. And that is okay. It's just, I know that I say it a lot, but I think it's valuable for people to hear it from someone else, because I know that I start sounding like a broken record after a while.
It's that grace, because you know what? How you think something's going to go, even if you've done all this pre-planning and you've got a bit of a schedule going and you responded to the kids' needs and you tried to get the connection in and all that sort of stuff, you still might not do what you set out to do. But that is not that's not like fate. It's like the failure aspect of it, because often we feel like we failed in that task, or we weren't successful, or it went wrong or something. But what it did is life is so dynamic. So every day, even if you plan things, you have to respond accordingly in the moment, or to the changes, or to, even if you think about the summer, like whether you stay in one place for the summer or whether you're traveling, there are other things as well. It's not just you and your nuclear family. It might be your friends. It might be other relatives. So there's always going to be lots of competing things which change sort of how much we can focus or how much dedicated time we can to do something. So all that is done is, if you can reflect on it afterwards with compassion, with so much compassion for yourself, and say, wow, I learned so much. I learned a lot about how to navigate summer. I learned a lot about the things that really give me joy in my business, the things that I actually find that I need a lot more focus and concentration for, or don't come naturally to me. And maybe in the future, that's something you can outsource. You're learning, you are getting information and feedback from every day that passes by in the summer. You learn about yourself, you learn about your kids. Ultimately, we want to be connected to the people around us. We want to engage in the things that we love. We want to learn about ourselves. And also don't feel guilty if you feel guilty. If you're feeling bad and you feel upset about it or irritated, this isn't, again, like, let's not talk about it with shame. I'm not saying, oh, it's terrible to feel guilty, because then that incites shame on people that, oh my God, I do feel like that. Just notice it, and then thank yourself for like trying to protect you. And then think about some of the great things that happened, some of the good times, some of the moments that you enjoyed. And maybe it's like, you know what? I'm really happy for the next term to start.
Yeah. I mean, I think I know that I will be going into my summer armed with this knowledge of how I can be a little bit more supportive of my child, because, we talked about it as a 7-year-old. Her needs are really very important, and not every day is going to be a play date day, right? And not every day is going to be a day where I have activities lined up for her. I know that I'm staying here for the summer for the large part, but there is going to be times where I'm going to need to focus on growing my business and ensuring that, she's okay while I do that. But I'm also going to need to be realistic of my expectations on myself. So thank you so much for all of your wisdom and helping us set ourselves up for success. Go into the summer with a renewed, or maybe a new perspective on how the summer unfolds, like how, and that, again, you may have these wonderful ideas and plans, and it might not come out. Like, you might come out of the summer and they didn't come to fruition, and that is okay. Like Claire said, you thank yourself for noticing it, and you move on, and you make another plan. And maybe that other plan will not go according to plan too. You just, when you don't succeed, you try again, right? And eventually.
Yeah. And just sort of lastly, I would say, everyone is doing their best. We are all doing our best, no matter what we're doing, business, no business, whatever. So I think you have to recognize that in yourself. Your kids are going to be, they're going to be all right. They're going to be all right. So just don't be hard on yourself. Have that compassion, have that grace. You're doing like really important things, right? And if you're engaging in something that you feel passionate about, that is also being modeled to your kids too, and has so many benefits for yourself and for them. So you owe it to yourself to advocate for yourself to be able to do that, right? Prioritize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Clare O'Byrne, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I always appreciate our conversations. I know that I always come out of them feeling a little bit re-energized. Thank you. That was my friend Clare O'Byrne, certified parent coach. If you're interested in finding more about Clare and her practice and how she can help you thrive as a family living internationally, please visit her Instagram account at Globally Thriving. That's at globally_thriving. And you can also catch her podcast, Globally Thriving Families, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Well, everyone, that is a wrap on season 1 of the Post-Production Podcast. I hope this episode resonated with you and maybe sparked a little bit of creativity. And if it did, please let me know. You can find me on Instagram at postscript.ae. You know I always love hearing from you and I always respond to your messages and comments. Thank you a million times over for being here every week, listening in, sending me your stories, sharing your experiences with me over the last few months. It's made my journey into podcasting so much less daunting and so much more fun. I've said this lots, but I'll say it again. It's truly because of all of your wonderful engagement that I keep on waking up in the morning and wanting to show up more and more. I can't wait to be back in September for even more sharing and fun. Have a wonderful summer, everyone. And as usual, keep your head high and keep moving forward one messy step at a time. Bye, everyone.